皆様お待たせいたしました。これから
Thank you for waiting. We would like to now start the breakup session that moves around the Korean peninsula and moves towards creating new order. So channel 1 is Japanese, channel 2 is English. And if you're not you cannot hear the interpreter's voice, please let somebody know. I will introduce the panelists. The moderator is Professor Okonogi from Keio University, Professor Emeritus. And the panelists, Professor Hajime Izumi, is Professor Emeritus of University of Shizuoka and Professor at Tokyo International University. And we have Professor Kurata. He's Professor and Director of Global Security Center at National Defense Academy. And we have Mr. Anton Khlopkov. He is from the Director of Center for Energy and Security Studies. And we have Ms. Sumi Terry. She's a senior fellow at Korean chair at the CSIS. And we have Mr. Sung-Lac, former South Korean envoy to six-party talks and a researcher at Seoul University. Professor Okonogi, please. So we'd like to start this Korean peninsula session. Compared with other sessions, we have more panelists. We have 5 panelists. But there is time constraint, but we think we can engage in rich discussion because we have a lot of panelists if I do the right job. So the theme is about the international order. But if you look at the situation at Korean Peninsula, compared with other sessions, it's really far from any order. The denuclearization that's going on, or the coexistence, or the balance, this kind of experiments, if they succeed, then we will be able to come up with a new order. Is it 2 plus 4, or is it 2 plus 2 plus 2? We don't know yet. But a new order will be built, I feel. However, there's no guarantee that the current experiment will succeed. So compared with other sessions, our session may be a little distanced from the main theme of international order. However, since the main topic is international order, we want to always be conscious about this regional order. And I think Professor Kurata, I would ask him to talk first, and then we'll go to Ambassador Sung-Lac, and then Ms. Terry, then Mr. Khlopkov, and then lastly to Ms. Professor Izumi. So we have many panelists, but nobody is here from North Korea or China. But I think Mr. Izumi will summarize that part. So I would like each speaker to just speak about 5 minutes, 7 minutes at maximum, please. And then we don't know how the discussion will evolve. And lastly, I'd like to take some time for Q&A session. We have 90 minutes, so how we'll be able to cover. Professor Kurata? Thank you. So at maximum 7 minutes, I will finish within that time. This dialogue, the whole title is Free and Fair and Transparent Order. Is that kind of order possible? If you look at the international relations at Korean Peninsula, the order that is being built right now is probably very different from that kind of order. It's not free, and it's not fair, and it's low transparency. So it is kind of a non-value. So it would be very conservative order. And order in the Korean Peninsula is based on approving the current state. So the North Korean internal transformation has not taken place, and it will not take place in the future. North Korea has a pile of ballistic missiles, and they will stick to that position, and civil values such as human rights. If we ask them to establish those values, they will stick to nuclear arms. So we have to leave the internal reform, and we have to just engage in denuclearization. So probably that is what's going to occur. So how are we going to make them abandon nuclear arms? The current experiment is to strengthen the NPT system and to link that with the Korean Peninsula situation. As you know, Korean Peninsula is at a truce, and we want to finalize this kind of a moratorium or truce, and that North Korea will think that since there's peace, they don't need to hold nuclear arms anymore. That is the attempt that we are trying to carry out. This is not the first time. And at the end of the Korean War, there was that kind of attempt. Nomhom regime, there was that kind of attempt. But this experiment is very difficult because to build a peaceful regime, there are different stages. But first is to stop the war and to make a declaration that the war is over, and then finally to conclude a peace treaty. But this process, if you go all the way down to the peace treaty, it will be difficult to go back to the truce stage. So the war is over, and the commander, the UN Command Office, Operation Office will have to be dismantled, and this peace process is not irreversible. North Korea promises denuclearization, but they have another new nuclear programs, and they regress. So denuclearization is reversible. So to link the peace process and denuclearization is asymmetrical. One process is reversible, one process is not reversible. So if this attempt is successful, it's fine. However, if you fail, what would happen? I don't even want to think about it. So the peace process is complete and the peace treaty is concluded and the UN operation is abolished. But if the North Korea still sticks to nuclear power, or if they have secret nuclear weapons arsenal, then the nuclear power will still remain. So which is better? Is it the current situation is better with nuclear arms? So how do we link the two processes? And both two processes should not be reversible. So we should have the peace regime and without nuclear arms.
And beyond that, what's the current situation in North Korea? Well, they are not even at the entry gate of the denuclearization. Six-party discussions with. There's first process. The first of the process is the freezing of what they have, as a matter of course. And there's no progress in denuclearization now because it's not even the question of freezing. But the scope of the facilities freeze is just Yonbyon facilities. And could they say that's the start of the denuclearization? But if there are other facilities, then it's certainly not a full denuclearization. The United States want to include Iran enrichment facilities. All facilities must be included, say, so that the denuclearization process will become irreversible. But as far as North Korea is concerned, they want to deal with just the Yonbyon facilities. If the United States goes against their words, then they will still have some remaining nuclear facilities. That's how the situation stands. So these two processes are to be connected. On the starting line, at least, North Korea should be willing to fully indicate, show intent that they will go denuclearize and come up with the inventory list in a very visual form. That should at least be the starting point from North Korean side. So that's my first set of remarks. Thank you. Right, thank you. Ambassador Sung-Lac.
Start with a general observation of the current situation. Since 2018, the peninsula situation has moved into an unprecedented summit-level diplomacy. Tension and confrontation of previous years was replaced by dialogue and negotiation. The moratorium of Kim Jong-un is still in place. This is what we see on the surface. But if we look beyond the surface, particularly if we look at from the perspective of genuine progress of denuclearization, we'll have to admit that the current result is far from satisfactory. First of all, U.S.-North Korean summit process appears to have reached the point of diminishing returns. The summitry has reached its peak in Singapore. Then it went into a anti-climax. And then came Hanoi breakdown. After Hanoi, North Korea demands a new calculus of Washington, citing deadline, year-end deadline, and also threatening so-called new pathway. Now, U.S.-North Korean negotiation is in limbo, despite Panmunjom encounter between Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim. Another point of observation is waxing and waning of Seoul's role. From the beginning, the Moon Jae-in administration started a very flexible North Korea policy, setting denuclearization and peace building through reconciliation and dialogue as a major foreign policy goal. It is in that context that Seoul has played facilitator's role between Washington and Pyongyang. The Seoul's role-playing has reached its peak in Pyongyang summit meeting in September 2018. And ever since, it went down to anti-climax. Now Pyongyang has cut off all the inter-Korean contacts. Even Pyongyang wants to dismantle Mount Kumgang tourism facilities, which has been a symbol of inter-Korean cooperation for a long time. So much so that Seoul's facilitator's role has lost its dynamism. Underneath this phenomena, a tug-of-war over issues like denuclearization, peace, hostile policy is going on. Both sides are struggling to find out some way out, but still it is stalemated. Here I want to draw your attention to two aspects. The first is the North Korea's triumphalism. Pyongyang believes that it has achieved a great success in Singapore by persuading Washington to accept that confidence building facilitates the denuclearization, not the other way around, and that the process is pursued in a step-by-step way. Naturally, Pyongyang sticks to that principle. Afterward, Pyongyang continues to try to achieve similar triumph, which is pretty much detrimental to negotiated resolution. From that kind of vantage point, Pyongyang considers the U.S. approach in Hanoi, which is leaning toward more comprehensive resolution without much confidence building, as an outright breach of Singapore agreement. Now Pyongyang is seeking another triumph, removal of the hostile policy of the U.S. first. The second aspect I would like to draw your attention to is the fact that the security and alliance issues have become bargaining chips in nuclear dealings from the beginning. Those are U.S. forces in Korea, joint military exercises, strategic assets, extended deterrences, and peace treaty. Up until 2018, those were not the part of the deal, but now they are. Further, these dealings are in the hands of Mr. Obama, who is known to be very unconventional. I'm sorry, Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much, my Russian friend. Having said this, I think the current situation gives Seoul a lot of difficulties. If the U.S.-North Korean negotiations collapse, there will be serious consequences. If the negotiation brings about some agreement, depending upon how Mr. Trump makes a deal, it may affect existing security structure. I'll stop here. And as to the outlook and possible way forward, I believe I will have a chance to talk later. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mercurial nature of Mr. Trump was mentioned. So, Ms. Terry, can you discuss American policy and also give us your general observation of the situation?
Difficult to talk.
はい、こんにちは。アメリカの政策について話すのは難しいです。というのは官僚主義がありますし、それから大統領がいます。ですからそういった注意書きから始めたいと思うんです。
Sort of coordinated U.S. policy. But let me step back and just review quickly on where we. Let's start from 2017. I'll just and where we are today, and I think a little bit of where we are headed. If you remember 2017, this is the year that North Korea crossed the U.S., red line in a way by conducting 3 intercontinental ballistic missile tests. That used to be a big deal. We from the U.S. government's perspective, there was a line that North Korea should not have crossed, but they crossed it 3 times. They did a hydrogen bomb nuclear test. And remember, this was a year of maximum pressure, fire and fury, rocket man on a suicide mission, talk about preventive strike even on North Korea. But it was also the year that we actually saw China and Russia implementing sanctions. And for skeptics like myself, it was really, to say that China actually implemented sanctions, that was a pretty big deal because we were trying to get China to do more in terms of implementing sanctions, and we've seen that. But and remember the way we ended 2017, it was very, all of us were bracing ourselves for this potential. There was even talk about North Korea conducting another test, atmospheric nuclear test over the Pacific Ocean. It was kind of a scary period. But then came the New Year's editorial, 2018. Kim shifts to symmetry and diplomacy, which is actually a very shrewd move on Kim's part. Instead of going all the way and showing 100% their nuclear capability, they stop around 90%, 95% with their nuclear program. He shifts to symmetry, sends the Olympic delegation to South Korea, the Pyeongchang Olympics, and you've seen all the symmetry that happened in 2018, including the Singapore summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. And you have to say, from our perspective, from the sort of, at least the Korea Watchers' perspective, and the Singapore summit, what that produced was disappointing because what it was really was an aspirational statement, right? North Korea working towards denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, right? The U.S. got more out of North Korea in the past in terms of wording. Working towards, and I work towards a lot of things. It doesn't mean I achieve them necessarily. We still didn't have agreed upon even definition on what denuclearization means, right? North Koreans are saying one thing when they're talking about denuclearization. They're talking about the entire Korean peninsula. They're talking about U.S. extended nuclear umbrella over South Korea, a whole host of things. When the United States is talking about denuclearization, we're talking about North Korea's nuclear program. So we don't even have, never mind roadmap or timeline or anything else, we don't even have an agreed upon definition. Now, 3 meetings later, and we saw what happened in Hanoi. And in Hanoi, I think, 2 leaders fundamentally really misjudged each other. President Trump, I think, misjudged Kim in the sense that he thought because it was the reason why Kim came to the negotiating table was because of just all of the fire and fury and maximum pressure. From Kim's perspective, it is also because he got North Korea's nuclear program to where it is, so that he thought he had leverage. And President Trump thought he could entice Kim to some sort of China-style, Vietnam-style, like sort of dangle this economic reform, and Kim could get Kim to give up nuclear weapons. And Kim thought President Trump listening to pundits like myself, that President Trump was so eager for a deal that he would just sign on to any kind of, even if it's a bad deal from U.S. perspective, because what the North Koreans asked for in Hanoi was it was not just a little bit of sanctions relief, right? It was a maximal sanctions relief. And now we have since then we have the DMZ meeting and the Stockholm talks, the finally working level talks resumed, and it fell apart. And we are now at an impasse. We are at an impasse, and I'm not sure where we go from here, because what North Koreans are asking for, this new approach, new method, new strategy from U.S., it's not even a peace declaration. It's not a liaison office. All of those were on the table in Hanoi. The United States was ready to put it on the table. What North Koreans now want is this maximum sanctions relief. And I'm not sure if the U.S. government is ready to give that, and it's already November. North Koreans kept talking about the end of the year deadline, which is 1 month left. And U.S. policy perspective, from U.S. policy perspective, we're in a very bad spot, because we only have bad policy options left, right? Either give North Korea what they need, maximum sanctions relief, for what we believe is not something that is substantial, right? Because even if they put Yongbin on the table, it has to be verified. We have to get people in there to be able to verify. We want a roadmap. We want a timeline. We want a declaration. We're not going to get most of that. So that's our option, or North Koreans are going to return to provocation. I absolutely believe Kim when he says he's going to return to provocation after the end of the year. Now, there's a lot of things that North Koreans can do that is beyond just returning to the intercontinental ballistic missile test or nuclear weapons test. There's a lot more that they can do to continually dial up pressure. I would say like a medium-range missile test over Japan. They could even do a satellite launch that uses the ballistic missile technology, but they can insist that this is still not an ICBM, to continually dial up pressure. And I think it's very difficult for the United States to return to maximum pressure stage of 2017. The fire and fury thing, this is something that's not really easily repeatable, because of all that Kim has done with the summitry and diplomacy and meeting with Xi Jinping 4 times, met with President Putin, met with Moon Jae-in how many times, President Moon. Now these countries have moved on. You can't do fire and fury second time around, not really, and to be credible. And we now know President Trump better. Right? Before we can say, oh, maybe President Trump was serious about this stuff. But we now know with what he's conducting, or how he's conducting himself with Iran or whatnot, that he doesn't want conflict. So it's not even credible to return to maximum pressure. Also with China and Russia, I think to get them to enforce sanctions the way we did in 2017, it's also not really possible. So we don't really have a whole lot of leverage. We don't have a whole lot of options. And I think, to be a realist about it, I hope we can talk a little bit about, I'm going to end in a minute, something more positive, but let me just be very realistic, ended in this note. I think North Korea is on the road of accepting their ultimate goal, which is to secure international acceptance of North Korea as a nuclear weapons power. It is already a nuclear weapons power, but I think they're on the road. And if you tell me right now which country has a better chance of achieving their goal, it's not United States. I think it's North Korea has a better chance of right now achieving their goal of securing international acceptance of North Korea's nuclear weapons power. I'm sorry to end it on this bad note. Hopefully I can have a chance to talk a little bit something more positive.
Right, thank you. Your points were, I think, for us, not obviously desirable, not good for us. And when the deals don't go right, or if the deals are successful, though the deals are bad deals, there are 2 ways, 2 options. And I think we can come back to that point later and expand our discussions. And Anton-san now.
First, I would like to start with a point where Suimi just finished her presentation. I do support her thesis that North Korea is very close to achieve its goal. This is why I think we should act rapidly. And we, I mean, all our countries were not good enough during the recent months. How to progress? What should be the key principles? And of course, I do not present a Russian governmental official, Russian government position here. I present a Russian view, my personal view as a Russian expert who follow the subject closely. We do have institutionally regular exchanges with experts, not only in the United States, Republic of Korea, but also in Pyongyang. I travel 3 times during last 12 months to Pyongyang, and we host North Korean colleagues in Moscow as well, just to better understand what is possible. So my observations based on those communications too. First, I don't see any prospects for bilateral deal. Let's have a look what happened recently. So many withdrawals from bilateral and multinational deals. You can like or dislike your negotiating partner, but if this partner has such a record, how you will make a bilateral deal with him? And for North Korea, the succession in US administration was always an issue. But after INF, after GCPOA, I think it's impossible to have a bilateral deal because the level of trust now even lower than it were a few years ago. And in our communication, North Koreans refer to this issue quite often. Official position of North Korea still, as I understand, they would like to have negotiations with US. But if you will speak with them informally, they more and more often refer to multinational approach, how to package a deal multinationally. It goes without saying that as part of those as part of this multinational approach, US and DPRK will play the leading role. But from my point of view, there is no chance to avoid multinational packaging. What other countries will be part of that negotiations, dialogue, we can discuss later. The formula I have in mind, because 6-party talks in some capitals, the title or the name became quite toxic, so we can name it P3+3, because nuclear weapon states, which were part of 6-party talks in the past, will have special responsibility if we will succeed in denuclearization. Next, step-by-step approach. I don't think we will be able to solve the problem by one step. And I think step-by-step approach, or somebody could call it phased approach, is the only one which can help us to lead to progress. Next, reciprocity is really important because, as we know, there was some progress during the recent months, and nuclear test moratorium, so-called ICBM launches moratorium, is really important, as well as some restrictions on joint US ROK exercises is really important. By the way, North Koreans formally and informally appreciate this step from ROK and US side a lot. But when we think about next steps, we should keep in mind that reciprocity is really, really important. And North Koreans feel that there was no reciprocity enough during the recent almost 24 months. Next, and I think this is a good point, that North Koreans more and more interested to be involved in discussions related to security guarantees. As some of you may follow from the media reports, that it was the issue which was discussed during President Putin meeting with Kim Jong-un in Vladivostok, and even the recent experience, my institute hosted the Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference last month. And we co-chaired one of the panels of the conference on security guarantees with North Korean diplomat. Again, still a lot of issues to be discussed, and I absolutely agree with the point where we still have to define what denuclearization actually means, and we should also define what security guarantees means. But this is, I think, the good sign that North Koreans are more interested in this approach. And here, think tanks, and I would like to return to this point, I made it yesterday during other panel, that think tanks should contribute. Creative ideas are badly needed. As Ambassador Sung-Lac mentioned that President Trump is unconventional president, I think all conventional approaches to progress on Korean Peninsula have already been tested. So we do need unconventional, creative approaches, and this is where think tanks and gatherings like this one can help. It's up to government to decide what approaches will be picked up and used, but we do need creative ideas. A couple of very final points. First, what approach should be used, what concept should be used. We should know that nuclear weapon-free zone is one of the concepts which is well developed, and we can try to apply that. As some of you may notice, after this, I think it was Panmunjom declaration. The translation from Korean by ROK and DPRK was different, and DPRK translated it using nuclear weapon-free zone. And the final point with regard to the sanctions, again, I don't see any changes with Russia's implementation of sanctions during last 2 years, because, I mean, there are no changes in the sanctions imposed by UN Security Council. But where I agree with my colleague from the CSIS that we should not overestimate how effective those sanctions are. During my last trip to Pyongyang in early October, my flight from Beijing to Pyongyang was rerouted to Kalma Airport due to weather conditions. So we arrived to Kalma Airport and stayed there for about an hour. And North Koreans, despite of all sanctions, built almost a new city, which is going to be a resort. But if you see it, well, it's impressive. Dozens of new buildings, equaling to some estimates 130 new buildings. It is expected to be a resort. All of those buildings completed from outside. Still, they have to be completed from inside. But for me, it was a clear sign how effective or ineffective sanctions are. And this is in the situation when North Koreans are improving their missile and nuclear capability. I will stop here.
Thank you so much. So, can we ask Mr. Izumi? Thank you. So, there's no Chinese panelists here. I'm going to talk about China as well, because several times a year I go to China regularly and I engage in discussion with Chinese. So I understand and I have an impression of how Chinese feel. So I'd like to introduce you to Chinese view, and I'd like to talk about building a order, international order in this region, and the role of Japan. So I don't think China is so interested in building a new international order in this region. China has an international order in mind, their own order, and Northeast Asia, mainly the Korean peninsula, it's difficult to build an international order. So there's the South and the North, there's no reconciliation, and the North Korea still has not had a diplomatic relation with U.S., and they decided to have a nuclear arms. So it's difficult to build a order in this region. But sometime in the future, if we are to make an order, then China wants to lead in building that order. That's clear. But it's not that time yet. That time has not yet arrived. So when it comes to order, the peace regime, how do we build the peace regime? Well, as for this, China is not very enthusiastic. They have not assertive role. They do not want to take an assertive role. But right now there is a truce, and if we want to build a peace regime, if we want to change truce to the peace treaty, China feels China must be there. Peace treaty cannot be signed without China. China will never accept that. But the road to peace treaty, well, the China is not thinking that this road to peace treaty will open up anytime soon. So it's very interesting to see the Chinese view, and that's the declaration of the end to the Korean War. I thought China was not interested in that at all. The important thing was to participate in the concluding the peace treaty. They were not very interested in the symbolic act of ending the war. However, last year, I feel that China became interested because the declaration of the end of the war, there is now we have the possibility to do this. Is it the U.S. and North Korea only, or is it going to be the multilateral treaty? Well, if it's going to be multilateral, China must participate, and China has changed its attitude. And it's simple because from China's perspective, peace treaty, you don't know when it's going to be concluded. But maybe the end of war declaration might be issued at any time soon. And that means that China's presence will be degraded. So China has changed its attitude all of a sudden. So China is now interested in the end of war declaration. But China is not engaged in peace structure building. So building peace regime is, I don't think China's role is so big in building peace regime. Why is that so? Because building peace regime means you have to solve three enemy or antagonistic relations, three antagonistic relations at the peninsula. And there has not been any dissolvement of antagonistic. That is that Japan and China and U.S. and North Korea and South and North Korea. So when that kind of antagonistic relation is solved, then we will see the peace regime. So building peace. Well, I don't think.
休戦状態でもって半世紀以上過ごしてるんですから。
So the end of the war declaration does not have much meaning in building a peace regime. If you really want peace to take root, then of course you need the North Korea and U.S. North Korea and Japan-China antagonistic relations solved. So that means that Japan has a big role to play. The Korean Peninsula peace, when it comes to this topic, everybody thinks that Japan has nothing to do with it. However, unless Japan takes an assertive role, we will not see peace in Korean Peninsula. So the free and fair and transparent international regime will not be made. So the Japanese role is quite enormous.
All right, thank you. So we've heard from 5 panelists the initial comments. And we don't have much time remaining, but still there are 50 minutes or so. So I'd like to go into deeper discussions, add depth to our discussions. Now, earlier, Ms. Terry, referring to Mr. Trump, there's now a possibility that he's going to give concessions. I think that was your point. He's likely to make concessions. I mean, we are approaching some point of climax because the election campaigns are getting heated for him, and North Korean deadline of within this year, and the deadline is approaching very fast. Now, on the North Korean side, they say the end of the year is the deadline, and it's not possible for the United States because of the implications of the election. And North Korea believes this is a time that they can have the favorable deal for them, because after the election, the consequences are unknown. One never knows what's going to happen to the American presidency. Mr. Trump may go, may not be there. So if the deal is successful or not successful toward the end of the year, what will be the consequences? In other words, what is your biggest concern about the progress toward the end of the year now?
So I think there's 2 ways to think about this. Many Korea watchers do believe that President Trump will conclude a deal with North Korea. End of the year is very tough. It's a month left. I mean, so I think that's very difficult. But I think certainly before the election, there's time, and there's an argument that can be made why President Trump would go for such a deal, because it'll be nice to have a foreign policy success, or that he will certainly spin as a success. Who can argue against peace? Everybody loves peace, and he says, "I brought peace on the Korean Peninsula," and he can spin that. But why I think I'm a little bit skeptical of a potential deal right now is because President Trump is very focused on domestic politics and impeachment process, and I think he has to answer this question for himself. What's better? Just to conclude a deal so he can say he has a foreign policy success, or he would have to defend a bad deal to U.S. In the aftermath of Syria decision, the pulling out the Kurds in Syria, he got a lot of backlash from the Republican Party. And, I think so A, he's distracted with impeachment politics, and B, I think he can't really afford to alienate sort of, some Republican senators who will criticize if it is truly a bad deal. And I would say it's a bad deal because North Koreans are not going to allow anything else except a deal that really works for North Korea at this stage. So I think that's tough, after saying Iran, that Iran deal was such a bad deal, right? So he has to be at least still mindful of all of that. And that's why I think we have to be, I'm not so sure that he's going to rush into a bad deal. After Hanoi, after he came back, after the failure of Hanoi, he was actually praised. There was actually bipartisan praise for that we said was the right thing, even by the Democrats. They said, well, it's the right thing for him to walk away from Hanoi. So now that said, I think there's a lot of time from now to the election, and it's certainly possible. So what I foresee, for example, is North Korea, as I mentioned in my earlier statement, let the year run out. There's an editorial that comes out of North Korea that says, we tried, it's all U.S.'s fault, and then continue to dial up pressure. Again, there are a lot of things that they can do that's not a straight to nuke test or ICBM test. And after they continue to dial up pressure, let's say the impeachment politics is over. Senate, we know Senate is Republican-led Senate is highly unlikely to impeach President Trump. President Trump comes out of that. And then let's say it's May, June. I can see potentially at that point having some sort of deal. Now, is it a deal that necessarily Japan and South Korea, well, I think South Korea is a different case because President Moon, I think, would appreciate a deal, but I think the Japanese might not like what that deal would be necessarily, just knowing, talking to a lot of Japanese here. But yes, so I think my answer to your question is I just think end of the year is just around the corner. And from Kim's perspective, I think he can afford to wait and just continue to dial up more pressure, unless President Trump is to give maximum sanctions relief. And I think that's difficult for him, even for President Trump, in such a short period of time, in the middle of this impeachment that's going on.
Right, thank you. The common sense tells me that after the Hanoi meeting, Kim Jong-un must have a lot of things on his head. His position was not really that good in Hanoi. I mean, he thought he was going to be successful in Hanoi, but he was not successful. So domestic prestige was maybe problematic for him. So spending 1 year, and I think he's improved his standing within North Korea. Now he believes he's the time that he has to be, and he believes that he's going to be successful in concluding a deal with the United States. So that's kind of a strong position that he's going to show. Ambassador Lee, what is your view about this? North Korean position about the progress to be or not to be made. Mr. Lee?
North Koreans are emphasizing the deadline. That's the rhetoric. However, North Koreans will make moves either before the deadline or right after the deadline, convincing that what they said will be materialized by actions. However, Kim Jong-un is aiming at kind of serious deal which will come sometime after that. So in that sense, I'm in general agreement with Sumitari that the crucial point of negotiation will come sometime middle of next year. Based on the words and deeds of Mr. Trump, another round of summit meeting cannot be ruled out. It may take place, and it may end up with some sort of agreement, which will not be a decisive denuclearization conclusion. It could be some sort of I would call it makeshift, or some kind of small deal that which could be easily unraveled. It has this aspect has something to do with the timeline of the next round of the meeting. If the conclusion, which would be made sometime next year, would be unraveled, that should not be unraveled before the elections. So in that sense, that meeting should not be taken place early in the year. If it is concluded earlier, there is more time to be unraveled. But no one can organize a summit meeting right before the US elections. So it could not be too early, should not be too late. So sometime June, July, that timeline could be possible. According to the North Korean understanding, as I understand it, they got some setback in Hanoi, but they may believe as of today that the setback they got in Hanoi can be recoverable, because US administration's behavior after Hanoi was very much mixed. Hanoi was a blow. We can understand the attack direction of Hanoi operation, but afterward, follow-up operation is very much mixed. So North Koreans may harbor a hope that they can redress the situation and bring the general flow of the situation in the direction of Singapore. So I don't believe North Koreans are frustrated. North Koreans are pretty much encouraged. They are doing their own game by means of rhetoric, threat, deadline, provocation, and summit meeting. So they will continue to do that.
Well, I have a similar impression. That is, after the Hanoi summit, it took time for them to come up with new policy, but they rebuilt themselves, and they have a policy to rebuild their economy themselves and to gather the domestic support and to again start negotiation with the US. That's the impression I have. So the game is not going at Trump's pace. And I feel that we now recognize that the game is played by the North Koreans' pace. But if the summit will not be easily held, if that's the case, it's hard to think that North Korea will go back to provocation. How much do they need the U.S.? Kim Jong-un like to ask U.S. to, that's the phased denuclearization and Myeongnyong plus little plus alpha, and so not so much promise. They don't want to reveal the whole denuclearization process. They don't want to show the plans for denuclearization. They don't want to get into that rigid promise, but they want to attain agreement for phased agreement. And that is the, I think, North Koreans' best way to go, because they will get the most and they will lose the least. So if the negotiation with the U.S. will not go smoothly or will not be successful, North Korea has declared they will take a new road. So what would this new road be like? New path be? What are the North Koreans thinking? they will not launch nuclear missiles all of a sudden. The new path, well, there is the old path that they came through. The ballistic missile launch and the nuclear missile launch, the nuclear test. It's not to promote those tests. And I don't think the new path will deny the old path either. Kim Jong-un, his ultimate goal is to have a deal with Trump. So the 2017, they had a brinkmanship. So I think Kim Jong-un will launch something, but it's not going to be an escalation that is not irreversible. So maybe he will seek for a deal that could be concluded if the relationship between leadership is good. He's probably hoping for a summit, but that's only the political declaration, but it will not entail any detailed documents. It's just to confirm political will. Myeonbong plus small alpha. I hope that they will attain alpha, beta, and gamma. But what kind of gift will U.S. give? Probably Kim Jong-un will seek for a big deal. And probably, I think we will not see any big deal within this year. But then come next year, will there be a heightened tension? No. If there's a deal, then the crisis will come slowly, but probably he will seek for a deal every time. Like, if he doesn't reach a deal, then it's not good, so he has to conclude a deal. So the Russian government, how does the government view the current situation? What kind of measure is it going to take? In the past, they were talking about the phased denuclearization and dual process. So the both process will proceed in parallel. That was what Russia was thinking, and that is very close to China's thinking. And I thought there's a communique with China on that. But the current situation, how do Russians view? Are Russians not concerned about the breakup of the negotiation?
Unfortunately, we do not have regular negotiations nowadays, so it's nothing to break. Again, it's unfortunate because we badly need dialogue nowadays, especially since the window of opportunity is closing. And here I will raise some doubts that North Koreans could be interested in a deal very close to next U.S. presidential elections. Because for them, one of the major concerns for years, it's not a recent one, succession in the U.S. because their perception, a great framework were killed because of the change of U.S. administration and what happened with GCPOA recently. And I should mention here that in our communication they refer to GCPOA experience a lot, and not only as a bad example, but they were trying to learn lessons from Iran negotiations. So they were trying to learn how to use multinational approach to package a deal, what advantages they may have, how to make it more sustainable. So from that point of view, the fact that at least in our communication, they refer to GCPOA experience, they were trying better understand how it was negotiated is a good example. Back to the Russian position. Recently, Foreign Minister Lavrov at the Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference and Deputy Foreign Minister Margulov mentioned that there is a new evolution of joint Russia-China framework, what should be done, what could be done on the Korean Peninsula. It's a kind of framework where there are some ideas how simultaneously we can progress in denuclearization and also in improving of the security environment and political relations in the region. As it was publicly presented, because I have not seen the document and I'm not sure that it was published, but how it was presented by Russian officials, that this document was circulated and discussed with the key capitals, including with Seoul, with Washington, with Pyongyang and with Tokyo. So there are some ideas what could be done, though again, I think we should be realistic what is achievable within next, let's say, 12 or 11 months. Here I think what is key, we had so many failed attempts to progress in the region. So if there is a deal, I think it should be well prepared and hopefully it will be sustainable, but not will disappear within few months after the US elections because of one side or other side measures.
Okay.
Just a quick comment and a follow-up and a question, if I may. I absolutely understand what you're saying about, from the North Korean perspective, any deal that you make with a U.S. administration, they also have a problem trusting us, right? They've learned that from a great framework from Clinton to Bush years, and they've seen it. So I absolutely understand your point. My question to you then is, does North Koreans, since you interact with North Koreans, does Kim Jong-un understand, though, that there is no other U.S. president, Democrat or Republican, that he can get a better deal with? So that's, I think, what is different this time around than maybe normal U.S. president, right? There's no other U.S. president who might put troops in South Korea on the table for discussion. Because President Trump is a very unconventional person. So that's what I'm curious about. I understand your normal thinking that from North Korean perspective, it's like, yeah, change of administration, they're not going to really follow through. But isn't it still better to have a deal with President Trump?
Well, first, I wish I do have access to Kim Jong-un and have asked him. But as you can imagine, I don't. But at the same time, we do have regular exchanges, as I mentioned, with the think tanks of the foreign ministry. And here I would like to mention for this particular audience, and I will answer the question of Sue-Mi in a second, that in January 2018, North Koreans established a new, what is called think tank in their foreign ministry, Institute of Japanese Studies. They don't have many, they have just 3. Institute of American Studies, and all nuclear issues are part of that institute. Institute for Peace and Disarmament, it's more about regional issues. And the third one was established Institute of Japanese Studies. I personally see it as an invitation for dialogue between what is called track 2.0, 1.5. I hope that Japanese think tanks will pick up this opportunity and try to better understand what could be done. To my knowledge, there was no progress in this regard since this think tank was established. But back to the question, you just raised. I think North Koreans understand that almost any deal with Trump could be reversible. So this is why to have a small win, which will be killed by the new administration, is not what they are looking for. And here, why they were looking, as I read that, for other countries' involvement. That's true that if there is a change in the U.S. administration, the U.S. could withdraw from the deal, but even nowadays, despite of all pressure on U.S. on GCPOA and withdrawal from the deal, it still exists. A lot of pressure a lot of difficulties. But US withdrew in May 2018. Now it's December 2019. And still there are some chances that it will survive. So again, from that point of view, this kind of thinking in Pyongyang, from my perspective, can make them to wait until the new administration. And what I saw, I could be wrong, you based in Washington, I am not, but what I saw, there are some indications from Democratic side that Democrats could be interested to continue engagement, probably in a different way, but what I've learned that some Democratic candidates and people who work for them are interested to continue engagement if there is a change in the White House as a result of November 2020 elections.
はい、それじゃあ
Right. Mr. Izumi, final thoughts from you, and then we'll open the process to the floor on any of the issues. All right, thank you. Well, so North Korea, new path or new way. What's to think about? How to think about this? I mean, it's not been clearly defined or mentioned. New path will be inevitable unless they move according to what American wants them to move. So what is important is it's a new path, so no going back to the past ways. Doing nuclear tests or launching ICBM. They are not indicating any of that now. And because they're talking about new path, this is to do something that Americans don't like. So most likely thing is there will be deepening of the relationship with China and Russia, and the trilateral cooperation between North and China and Russia will be deepened. But that would not be likened by Russia or China. So trilateral initiative may be difficult to do. But if there is such a trilateral ganging up between the three countries, that would be a bad idea for the United States, and that could be referred to as a new path. And that's maybe on their mind. And also, toward the end of this year, North Korea would wait. And if there's no move from the United States, what will be the next step made by North Korea, as I said before? Is it going to be nuclear tests, ICBM launches, or to complete the ICBM technology? No, that's unlikely. I say that for two reasons. Because North Korea is coward, sort of a coward country. And they always take a brinksmanship sort of attitude. And it seems as if they're walking on the cliff, edge of the cliff. And if they know that if they overstep themselves, then the United States would be a real threat. If they go for ICBM launch, full scale, then the United States would have military means to stop that. And North Korea obviously wants to avoid that from happening because they are a coward. So I say that there will be no launching of ICBM, so nuclear tests to be resumed. But another thing is that what is stopping ICBM launch is that it's the voluntary decision taken by North Korea. It's not a commitment between the U.S. and North Korea. It's their own decisions that they've made. And this is that Labour Party's Central Workers' Party's plenary decision in July of last year. It was interesting how they decided. He said it was not necessary. Unnecessary was the word used. And once that word uses, it's very difficult to go back and to reverse that. In other words, they internally are saying that the ICBM is complete. Because ICBM is complete, they have a full nuclear deterrence against the United States that they say domestically, for domestic owners. Therefore, no more is needed. The United States can never be able to attack the North Korea. Is the legend, myth that they've created. That's why there's the word "not necessary" was used. But once they declared it was not necessary, it's going to be necessary again. Not likely. If they say that it's necessary again, they have to admit that the previous policy was wrong, which will question the legitimacy of Kim Jong-un's leadership. So, I mean, they said it was necessary. That's why they stopped. If they just suspended without saying it was not necessary, they would have been unable to go back. But now that they've said that they thought that these tests were not necessary, they cannot go back and restart these tests again.
Thank you. We have discussed quite a lot. And the current situation is opaque and it's in transition, so we cannot talk anything definite. We were kind of guessing. So I guess we didn't have a heated discussion. We were all wondering about what to make of the situation. But nevertheless, we'd like to solicit questions from the floor. Maybe we can get a good discussion. We see 2 hands. Please, the person in the front first. Please be brief. My name is Meguro. I'm an Okinawa watcher. I'm not an expert on Korean Peninsula, but I'm interested in the East Asian security because that relates to Okinawa. The Katena base, it's watching North Korea. So that's why I'm interested. I have a question for Ms. Terry. Well, for U.S., or rather for Mr. Trump, deal with North Korea, what is the weight or what is the priority for him? He has so many policies. What I hear so far is that Mr. Trump is thinking about the presidential elections and he wants to get a deal with North Korea and he wants to display that deal as his achievement. But does he really think of it so important? Because he has other problems like with Syria or with Taliban or Iran and so on. So how big is this North Korean issue for Mr. Trump? And is there still possibility that he does not get a deal with North Korea? Okay, let's get another question first.
I opened the French office in Pyongyang 7 years ago. I realized that we are here after more than 60 years of a signature of a truce. So what is your feeling about this 60 years pass, and we are in that kind of situation now? And we are a bit confused, as you say, but confused if you don't have any understanding of the 60 years has been passed. Of course you are confused, and I belong to the confusing part of the world. I mean, so what is your feeling about these 60 years past? Thank you.
なんだっつった60年。あは、非常に大きな話です。はい、もう一人どなたか。
Any more question?
Interesting discussion. There's been a lot of talk about the possibility of a deal, the timing of a deal, the circumstances in which a deal could be struck. I would like to ask the panelists, does any deal include the possibility that the North will give up nuclear weapons, particularly in the light of the Libyan and Iraq experience? Will nuclear weapons ever genuinely be part of a deal?
Oh, I see another hand. Okay, this will be the last question.
From the Embassy of Brazil. Over the last year, we've seen North Korea make a lot of progress in their missile program, advancing solid fuel missiles and several other technologies. And as Mr. Khlopkov has said, they have been getting pretty good at working around the sanctions. So it seems like they're not in such a bad situation as it is. So how do you see the chance that they might not seek a deal next year, but rather be willing to live with a no-deal situation? That puts the ball in the U.S.'s court, in the sense that North Korea could think that they are in a better position now than they were 2-3 years ago to defend themselves. And so they might not be in such a rush after all. How do you see that, the likelihood of no deal being a possibility? Thank you.
I'd like to ask Ms. Terry to answer that deal question. Okay, one more question. My name is Yoshida from the Defense Academy. As to the content of the deal, in the Pentagon publishing and the Chinese government said that it's difficult for North Korea to denounce nuclear powers, so nuclear power, and they will request just freezing the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. I think that I recall that was the position, but at this stage, President Trump and North Korea, what kind of deal will that be? Is it just to affirm their political stance? But will there be a real basic denunciation of nuclear arms by North Korea? Or is it just political affirmation? Which is more realistic deal? So there was a freeze of the nuclear arms by North Korea, I think. Okay, anybody? The first question.
Trump wants a deal. I think in theory, sure. If you don't have to give this maximum sanctions relief, he won. Remember, he was talking about potential Nobel Peace Prize, and right now, he doesn't really have a foreign policy success story anywhere. So it'll be nice to have it as something that he can spin as a foreign policy success story. That said, as I stand by my earlier position, what do you have to do? Like, you don't want the optics to be, it was such a bad deal that President Trump gave it away. That doesn't really work for President Trump. So in theory, yes. But I think he could live with, as long as North Korea does not conduct nuclear tests or an ICBM test, he's fine with that also. The problem is whether Kim, as Professor Izumi said, it will really abstain from a nuclear test and ICBM test. That's a key question. On nuclear deal, giving up, I do not see any deal in which North Korea would actually give up nuclear weapons in light of Libya, in light of Iraq, in light of all the mistrust. That said, there could be an agreement. We have had many agreements with North Korea. It's just that every single time it fell apart over verification. So there could be an agreement, but it is not going to lead to a denuclearization of North Korea giving up nuclear deals. And I just want to answer final question on North Korea not seeking a deal. I think that's also entirely possible because Kim wants, I truly believe Kim's goal is to get international acceptance of North Korea's nuclear weapons power. So either there can be a freeze deal for a while, that's possible. But if he cannot get what he wants in terms of sanctions lift, whatever, he could just also sit by and work with China, work with Russia. He looks like a normal person now, right? For the last 2 years, he's taking a selfie in Singapore. All of a sudden, he's a normal guy, normal leader of a normal country. Just keep this up, and he will get there.
Yes, please.
Let me try to answer some of the questions, including Mr. Jennings' question. Of course, the giving up of nuclear weaponry should be the target of our negotiation. It should be included as a matter of course. However, talking about the step-by-step approach, it may not come in the beginning stage, but at least I can tell you, and that's my position, my government position, and I believe it's the positions of the many capitals, that eventual giving up of nuclear weaponry should be included in the final deal. And coming back to the step-by-step approach, the better approach is that even at the beginning stage, giving up of nuclear weapon has to be stated and confirmed. That was the approach we had in the six-party process. For example, September 19 joint statement included that line. However, after September 19 joint statement, North Korean position has been strengthened according to their logic. And now they never talk about the eventual giving up of nuclear weapon. Even they say removal of the hostile policies should come first, and confidence building will come later, and then they can consider the eventual giving up. That's not the position we can honor, we can buy. Our position is that eventual giving up is a mandatory. That's the heart of the negotiation. That's the objective of the negotiation. And it is highly preferable that from the beginning stage, that principle has to be agreed upon. That's the comprehensive agreement. And then we can consider step-by-step sliced implementation. That's what I can tell you about the question from Mr. Jennings. And I can add one more comment on the no-deal option. I don't believe it's an option on our part, as I call it, option, one of those alternatives we can choose from. Because if the no-deal things happen, it doesn't necessarily mean then it will be a status quo. If the situation comes sometime next year, whole situation will go back to confrontation and tension, even fire and fury. That is why that's not something we can consider as an option or as an alternative. That is something that will be fall on us as kind of fate or destiny. That's not a good thing, I think.
Couple of points. With regard actual denuclearization, I absolutely agree here with Ambassador Sung-Lac. In any agreement, any deal which will be and hopefully achieved, it must include confirmation, reaffirmation that complete denuclearization is our ultimate goal. Though, as a first step, as Ambassador Sung-Lac mentioned, probably it's not achievable. And here I should mention that I personally do believe that we were quite close to a big step in Hanoi, because as my interviews with those people who were involved from both sides in those negotiations shows both sides recognize that the whole Yonbyon facility was on the table. There were some differences on verification, but both sides confirmed in our communications that North Korea was ready to put full, complete dismantlement of Yonbyon on the table, and this is a huge step. I know that the issue was with Alpha plus sanctions, but I think the biggest problem was that there was not enough time for real negotiations. So again, if we are able to return to this big step, I think it should be considered as an important first step in the direction of complete denuclearization. With regard to wasting time, how serious North Koreans are, there are few signs which at least makes me to think that they probably serious. If you will have a look on their delegation in Stockholm, there was no any significant results, outcome of that meeting, but their delegation were quite significant. I was with the delegation on the plane from Pyongyang to Beijing, and, well, I know most of them, and they are the best people, the best experts on nuclear issues and on Korea-US relations, whom they have in the foreign ministry. And for me, this is a sign that probably they are serious. This is first. Second, they establish a special post for negotiations. If they are not serious to establish a special post for just 4 or 5 months, and again, to appoint for this special post quite an influential person, I don't think my reading that they are not serious. And there are some other signs which makes me to conclude that they still will try to negotiate. Not complete denuclearization as a first step, but my understanding that they are still interested to have a deal.
はい、どうもありがとうございます。
Thank you so much. So, what is now the difference with the past 60 years? That question. Well, in the past 60 years, there was a 6-party talks for denuclearization, and there were other attempts. But the peace regime, to discuss about peace regime, denuclearization and the peace regime were not discussed together in the past. That was not discussed jointly. In the past, they were talking about the divide between North and South and the mutual deterrence and the balance of power. That discussion was not taking place. But right now, what is taking place is a new experiment for sure. However, experiment does not always succeed. That's the problem. So that's my view. So thank you for listening to our discussion for such a long time. Time is up. So we must close the session. Perhaps the discussion was not a heated one, but I think panelists did their best. So let's give them a big round of applause.
壇上の皆様どうもありがとう。
Thank you to all the panelists. So we will conclude this session.
連絡事項ですが、
Housekeeping announcements. So we will have a wrap-up session in the adjacent room. So we will summarize the 2 days discussion. So if you have time, please do attend that wrap-up session.